are now listening to the War Report Podcast Network.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the College Loop Podcast, episode 270 of the College Loop Podcast. I'm Dylan Larck, A-Boy on Twitter, here to catch y'all up on Auburn athletics as Auburn is on a win streak in football. They are 3-5 on the season as they get ready to play 5-3 Vanderbilt in Jordan-Hare Stadium at 11:45 a.m. Auburn, surprisingly enough, opens up as the favorite in that game, but more on the preview of that game on the Thursday show, where we're going to decide whether or not Auburn has a chance to take down Vanderbilt, which, of course, they always do. But starting off with the Hugh Freeze press conference, just a few little pointers from this one. It was pretty much cut and dry. First thing he mentioned, the first question he was asked about was about Diego Pavia. Of course, everyone knows that Pavia was the quarterback for New Mexico State last year, which was one of Auburn's losses. Auburn's first loss, I believe, to a G5 opponent ever, and probably one of the more embarrassing losses on paper than any other loss Auburn has ever sustained. But basically what Hugh Freeze talked about was how tired of Diego Pavia that he was, which can't really blame him for that matter. I mean, I think that overall it was Auburn not being able to scheme around what they were doing offensively. He even mentioned that whenever they played New Mexico State last year, they actually had no real way of getting the ball back. They didn't get the ball until 5 minutes left to go in that first quarter. Did nothing with it, and then after that, it was all for naught. With Vanderbilt, they're going to control the clock. They at least they want to, at the bare minimum. And I mean, whenever you watch Vanderbilt play, this is something that Hugh Freeze talked about. It's something that everyone's going to be talking about for the entire week, is just how good Vanderbilt's offense is at keeping the ball away from the opposing team. Now, Vanderbilt isn't like ranked all that high when it comes to offensive, like rank. I think total offense, they're like 90th. But when you're killing that much clock and you're only using like 1, 2, 3 drives a half, I mean, you're going to get a little less yardage than most, but you're controlling it. You own the pace of the game. Alabama only had 18 minutes of time possession. They had like 18 total plays, and opposed to Vanderbilt having, 42 minutes of the game. And Vanderbilt didn't win that game by a lot. It was a 40-35 point win. Strictly because, I mean, they couldn't stop Alabama's offense, but they slowed down the game enough to where Bama had to wait. Vanderbilt was on the field for all that time, was able to get down, wear and tear at Bama's defense until they got in the end zone and scored points. And they forced Alabama to make mistakes offensively. But that was one of the things he talked about, was he's tired of Pavia, which you're going to see a lot of him on Saturday. He is. I'd be remiss to say I think Auburn's going to be able to keep them off the field. Auburn one-time possession, I think the last 2 games, maybe the last 3 games, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think Auburn can win it here. It's going to be an issue trying to get them off the field. All you can do is really slow them down and get them off the scoreboard, which is what you're going to want to do. Another thing Hugh Freeze talked about was the game plan going into the Kentucky game, which he talked about how he wanted to pass the ball because of the lack of film that Auburn had on teams being able to run the ball on Kentucky's defense. And I think kind of goes back to, I don't think really Kentucky has played a running back of the caliber of Jarquez Hunter. You just haven't seen that yet. I mean, of course, Trevor Etienne, but I don't think he was really a factor. And Jarquez Hunter, of course, is the best back in the SEC. And out of nowhere, I mean, he talked about how, he kept wanting to pass the ball. He was like, we're just going to run it. But he wanted to pass the ball, which good coaching on his part, that he was able to see what was working and not divert from it. A lot of issues that Auburn had in the losses was their inability to keep doing what works, because they felt that they were in panic mode and took the game plan out of their own hands and tried to switch it up, and mistakes were made, losses were had. And Auburn, of course, is now 3-5. But it is nice to know that whenever Auburn went down 10-0, the game plan was still, at that moment, to keep giving it to Jarquez Hunter and not to force passes down the field. So that was a very nice thing to hear that, he was like, I want to do this, I want to do what I want to do, but this is working. We got to keep doing this if we want to win. And they did, and they got the win. And going forward, I mean, who knows what the run game will look like throughout these next 4 games. I think A&M's the best defense Auburn has left. And then, of course, you have one more away game going to Tuscaloosa. So, yeah, another thing that he touched on was special teams. Penalties need to stop on special teams. He said this, and I think everyone kind of shares that regard. I mean, Auburn, I think it's been 3 games in a row where Auburn has had a penalty on a kickoff. I believe that maybe their first kickoff is maybe what it was. But it's just baffling that Auburn finds ways to make sure that they don't start in – like they start inside their own red zone more often than not because they try to do it. And it's like, I mean, maybe they're not trying to do it, but it just feels like that's what's happening too much for it not to be an issue that needs to be talked about. It's been an ongoing thing throughout the entire season. I mean, I got confused. I confused myself talking about the game on Sunday because I didn't remember a lot of penalties coming up, but a lot of penalties that come up from the special teams. I didn't remember a lot offensively. I didn't remember a lot defensively. But then it kind of came to me after I looked at the box score that, yeah, a lot of them came from special teams. Auburn's one of the worst teams in the country, I believe, or at least in the SEC when it comes to special teams penalties. And other than that, they're not that bad in the other 2 lands. And, of course, they messed up on the punt return. Keontae Scott returned it about way to half field. And then I don't know where penalty comes out, and now they're starting at the 8-yard line. So, yeah, an issue that needs to be fixed. You cannot make mistakes in this Vanderbilt game. You can't. Auburn, you cannot shoot yourself in the foot against Vanderbilt because this team is built on making sure that if you make mistakes, they're going to answer back. If you give them opportunities, they're going to take them. And Auburn can't do that against this game, especially when this is, one of those must-win games we talked about. You lost to Missouri, you lost to Arkansas, and you lost to Oklahoma. Those 3 games are games that you were supposed to win. You can't lose any more of those this season. And you got 2 more. You got Vanderbilt, you got ULM. And then at that point, you're 5-3 going into or 5-5 going into the last 2 games of the year. And you decide whether or not you want to go to a bowl game or not. I don't know which one of those games is more winnable out of the last 2, out of A&M and Alabama. But ultimately, I think it's Alabama's the easiest game to win out of those 2. A&M might end up winning the SEC outright. So keep that in mind as the season draws closer to it. And then we have 4 more games left. And then Hugh Freeze kind of wrapped up with talking about, he gave props to a lot of the guys that we've seen this far, some of the transfer guys. Said Kieran Crawford played his best game as a Tiger. Got pressure on the quarterback a lot. Kind of forced Brock Vandegrift to run into sacks for Keldrick Falk. Keldrick Falk got 2 sacks. And, with that, those 2 sacks came off of Kieran Crawford pressures. And, of course, we talk about Keandre Leonard-Smith, the guy who's just been lights out all year. He is a dog. And I've said it before, one of the best wide receivers that I've ever seen at Auburn. Hopefully other people can share that regard, people who have more experience in the Auburn realm than I do. Because, of course, my first wide receiver I remember really being able to watch was Darvin Adams. And I don't think Darvin Adams gets nearly enough credit for how good he was while at Auburn. And, of course, Darvin Adams was the last Auburn receiver to get double-digit touchdowns in a season in 2009. And before that, after that, the most touchdowns Auburn has let a receiver get in the last few years was 2019, where Seth Williams got 8. So he's on pace, 4 games left. Keandre Leonard-Smith could hit the double-digit mark on touchdowns. I don't know about 1,000 yards. I think we're kind of out of that realm of possibility. But the touchdowns, definitely opportunity, especially if you keep giving him opportunities in one-on-one coverage in the end zone. And then just that's kind of all I have for the Hugh Freeze press conference. Last couple of things. Shout out to Jarquez Hunter, SEC Offensive Player of the Week. Also, just a lot of accolades from this week. He's now the SEC's leading rusher. He had the 4th most rushing yards in a game by an Auburn Tiger. He was PFF's highest rated running back of the week. He was one of the other things that he did this week. He broke records. He had the most rushing yards in the game by any player this season. Correction, not even running back, any player. Reese's Senior Bowl Offensive Player of the Week, the Shrine Bowl Offensive Breakout Player of the Week, and a bunch of other Twitter Page has named him their player of the week. I mean, he earned a lot of accolades this week, as he should. And then Isaiah Miller, too tall. Miller got SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week, had a really great game. And I mean, of course, Hugh Freeze, let's talk about this one. I forgot to kind of put it in my notes. This 5 that we saw, it was Dylan Wade at left tackle, Braden Joyner at left guard, Connor Liu at center, Jeremiah Wright at right guard, and Xavier Miller at right tackle. That has been the best 5 that we have seen on this offensive line all season long. Most complete unit, and only one game in. I mean, yeah, they played against a good defense, and it really shows that this should be the lineup going out, and I think it will be. Just need to have them continue to do that. Vanderbilt has 18 sacks in the year. Of course, they do get pressure more often than not, and they will get pressure on the quarterback if you allow them. But this unit can really help kind of keep those to a minimum. All right, so we have a couple more things before we talk about basketball. Well, before we do, we're going to do the SEC Power Rankings, and then after that, we're going to go into a little bit of a break. And on the other side of that break, talk about the 5 things Auburn football needs to do to beat Vanderbilt. So during the SEC Power Rankings, kind of run through them real quick. 16, I have Mississippi State. Still think they're the worst team in the SEC. 15, Kentucky falls down to 15 to me. 14, Missouri. 13, I have the Florida Gators. Auburn makes a little bit of a jump to me, jumping up to 12. I still think Missouri to me is because Missouri fell off heavily after losing to Alabama by 34. So I'm going to drop them there until I see Brady Cook back to being healthy, and then they're back into the mix for me. Florida had a good game against Kentucky on a bye week. I can't wait to see how they play against Georgia this Saturday. That's a game I'm really excited to watch out for. Again, Auburn 12. Oklahoma have 11. Played pretty close to Ole Miss for a little bit, but then kind of decided to run away with it. Arkansas has been very impressive this year. I have them at number 10. 9, I have Ole Miss. 8, South Carolina. South Carolina, of course, being kind of got their butt whooped by Ole Miss, but have looked pretty good since then. 7, Vanderbilt. 6, Alabama. 5, LSU. In my top 4, I have Texas A&M. Number 3, I have Tennessee. 2, Texas, and number 1, Georgia. Top 3 did not move whatsoever. A few other teams kind of moved around a little bit. Alabama jumped Vanderbilt. And then 8, after Vanderbilt, I don't really know how to rank these teams completely. I mean, there are people who are not going to stand by what I said. Completely understandable. SEC is a jumbled up mess of coagulation of what are these teams. So we're going to go to a quick break. Outside of this break, we're going to talk about the 5 things Auburn football needs to do to take down the Vanderbilt Commodores this Saturday, and then wrapping it up with Auburn's exhibition game versus Furman. We'll talk about that after this break. So we'll be right back. Are you tired of having to rummage through just clothes after clothes after clothes, looking for something to wear? Are you tired of your friends making fun of you for your terrible fashion sense? Well, do we have the shirt for you? Go to thewarreport.com, get your laptop out and do it right now. Go to the shop and get your very own Feelin' Loopy t-shirt as well as your college loop hat, and you can get both of them for only $25 each. Plus shipping and handling, of course. But with that, now back to your regular scheduled program. Of course, that's on thewarreport.com. Go to the shop. First page, college loop hat. Second page, Feelin' Loopy t-shirt. But the comfortable items you're going to wear in your entire life. Thanksgiving's coming up. Halloween, it'd be a little too late to get them by this point. But, if you're wanting to do that matching outfit thing with your family, why not dress up as a looper in your family holiday photos? So, getting into the 5 things Auburn football needs to do to win versus Vanderbilt. Number 5 on my list is just basically a disclaimer. Don't resort back to what you were in week 4 through 8. Watching Auburn play from Arkansas all the way down to last week versus Missouri. You cannot resort back to that. You need to take this win and run with it. Don't go back to what you were doing. Don't try to force passes down the field anymore. You've proven versus Kentucky that you are a run-first team. Continuously do that. Don't try to go back and do all this other stuff you were doing. Don't try to do anything fancy. This team is not built for fancy yet. So don't go back to that. Don't give away the football. Vanderbilt will make sure that you are punished for giving them the football. Of course, I believe they're top 5 in the SEC when it comes to interceptions. So keep that in mind. No turnovers against Vanderbilt. I mean, you had one, and of course, Hugh Freeze talked about it. It was just a misran route by Malcolm Simmons, but you can't have that versus Vanderbilt. Number 4, the short passing game needs to be the main source of passing yards. So what we saw versus Kentucky was a lot of mixed routes that we're not used to really seeing with this team. Not a lot of down the field passes were done. It was a lot of quick outs, post, slants, out ends, outs, fades, all that stuff. You don't have to pass the ball down the field. Vanderbilt was kind of done up on by Quinn Ewers because of the quick passes. And you kind of found a little bit of a stride. You're not trying to force anything down the field. You're not trying to force anything in double coverage down in the intermediates. If you have those out routes, you're just getting the ball to your guy. And of course, we've seen out routes that didn't work last year versus Vanderbilt. There was a bad throw. That was a pick 6. But we saw something that really worked out well with this team. It's a nice mix for this team to kind of go from running the football down the third of the defense to getting the ball out quickly, getting the ball to Keandre Lewis-Smith, getting to Cam Coleman, getting it to Malcolm Simmons, Rivaldo Fairweather, Perry Thompson, Robert Lewis had a good catch. So he's continuously doing that is what Auburn needs to do in order to win this game on Saturday. Quick passes need to be at. All right, number 3. This one's going to be kind of obvious. These kind of are synonymous with each other, though, number 3 and number 2. Number 3, keep Diego Pavia inside the pocket. Now, they're going to run the football a lot. They like to run the option. Hugh Freeze compared it to playing Navy, and they have a big playability down the field. You have to make sure Diego Pavia is not making plays out of nothing. You have to keep him inside that pocket. Auburn's had a very good season on the defensive line. Keldrick Falk has 7 sacks in the year. He's 5 away from Auburn's single-season sack record with Nick Fairley, who had 12 in 2010. He's 3 away from being tied with like 8 other guys for that record, for like 3rd place, I want to say. So keeping him inside the pocket is going to be necessary. They've given up 11 sacks in the year, which is not a lot. So for Auburn to defensively win this game, you need to keep Diego Pavia honest. Something you weren't able to do at New Mexico State, but you have more practice against him than any other team does in the SEC. So that's what you got to do. You can't let him do what he did against Alabama. You can't let him do what he did against Texas. You can't let him do what he did against Missouri. You got to keep him honest. Number 2, this is where I kind of went with synonymous. Don't let Vanderbilt control the clock. This game is being played in Jordan-Hare Stadium. So this is where Auburn should have reign over how this game is getting played. Home field advantage. This game is sold out. So what you need to do is you need to force Vanderbilt to make mistakes however you can do it. You can't let them make plays in open space. You can't let them get by you. Auburn plays a lot of freshmen. They play a lot of freshmen. Jay Crawford, Kenzie Faustin, you have Caleb Harris, DeMarcus Riddick, Amaris Williams, Malik Blockton. All those guys are going to get looks. They're going to try to get past the freshmen and try to make them make freshman mistakes. You can't do that. This is a must-win game. And, of course, no one's going to hold it too far against these freshman guys. Jay Crawford has looked outstanding this season and has really earned the freshman honors that he is getting. Finally got over the hump with interceptions, too. But kind of going into the rest of this season and kind of going into this game, Vanderbilt is going to play their game plan to a T. That Clark Lee has coached this team up great. I mean, they don't have more talent than anybody in the SEC, but they're outplaying a lot of teams. Auburn can't let them do that. You have to force them into 3 and outs. You have to force turnovers. You have to make sure that they do not get in the end zone. And, I mean, Auburn has done a pretty good job throughout the season of keeping teams out of the end zone for a substantial part of the game and then kind of breaks down in the fourth quarter. Can't do that. Whenever you have a guy like Diego Pavia as your quarterback, he's going to play all 4 quarters. You have to as well. So, and then lastly, number 1, run the dang football. Don't Go out of it. Don't leave it. Don't flip the page on the playbook. The run game worked against a great Kentucky defense last week. Vanderbilt, though they've not given up a lot of rushing yards in the game, held Alabama to 84, held Texas to 106. This is the best running back that Vanderbilt has played all year long. They played Nathaniel Noel. He had 199 yards against this defense. This defense can be outmanned. They're not the best pass defense in the world. They're a pretty good run defense. But again, they haven't played a running back to the caliber of Jarquez Hunter. I'd be remiss to say they haven't really played a running back that can be as explosive as, or that is as explosive as Damari Alston, which you probably have. But Damari offers a great 1-2 punch whenever you need him to. And Jeremiah Cobb, when used correctly, is a great outside the hashes back to use. When the going gets tough, run the football. If you fall behind, keep running the football. Unless it's too late in the game, then you probably need to pass it. But I don't need to see what I saw. I mean, this goes all the way back. It's a full circle. It all goes back. What we saw in all the losses was Auburn leaving the run game. We saw in all those losses before that Auburn would run the ball, then find themselves going back to passing it. The passing game wouldn't work, but at some point you put yourself in so deep of a hole that you can't stop passing the ball. So going to this game, continuously run the football. Knock on wood, Jarquez Hunter is pretty hard to bring down, and I think you're looking at another big game from him if you continuously run the football. So, yeah, number one, run the dang ball. So, just kind of going back over those 5, don't go back to what you were in the past few weeks. I know this is a new thing for Auburn football, getting a win, but you can't resort back to what you were before that. That area between the New Mexico game and the Kentucky game, that little dark period right there, the dark ages of Auburn football this year, you can't go back to that. Don't de-evolve from what you are. You need to evolve your game. So 4, again, the short pass game needs to be utilized a lot. 3, keep Diego Pavia in the pocket. And then number 2, to that, don't let them control the clock. Number 1, of course, run the dang ball. I cannot say that enough. Run the football. End quote. Quote, end quote, quote, run the football, end quote. Run the ball. I can't watch another game where Auburn has to throw the ball 20 plus times in a game. It shouldn't be happening. Or at least it shouldn't happen. 20 is not a lot. Then you go 30. Auburn should be passing the ball 30 plus times a game right now. But that does it for the football segment of today's show. Kind of going into men's basketball because it's basketball season. If you're getting excited about Auburn football right now, you should. They won a game. But also get excited because Auburn basketball is right around the corner. And by right around the corner, I mean a couple of days. So Auburn took on Furman in South Carolina for their first exhibition game of the season. They have another one this week. Auburn beat Furman 83-62. Starting 5 was an interesting one. I guess Miles Kelly was not able to play because I believe he was sick. JP McGeese, Denver Jones, Chris Semo, Janai Broome, and Dylan Cardwell were your starters. But Auburn had a pretty good outing defensively. Held Furman to 62 points. That is that Furman is one of those teams that you will typically see in March. So really good outing for them. The only issue I really had with this game was the fact Auburn kind of shot the ball a lot from the 3-point line and didn't get a lot of them in. Auburn shot 4 for 22 from the 3-point line, which is 18%, which exhibition game, I'm not going to hold them to that too much. You're just kind of trying things out, and what can you do? Denver Jones shot 1 of 5. Janai Broome shot 0 of 3. Todd Pettiford actually shot 2 of 5, and more on him in a second. And then Chad Baker-Brazzaro shot 0 for 4. Janai Broome had a great game, per the usual. I don't think anyone's shocked that Janai Broome had an outstanding game. 18 points, 14 rebounds in 28 minutes. Trying to get him accustomed to playing a lot of time. I mean, you're going to have Janai and Dylan Cardwell are going to be splitting time as a 5. Janai might play a lot of games as a 4 and get Dylan Cardwell more looks at the 5, which I think works out perfectly. Janai is a stretch 4, and I think he will get drafted to play that 4 position. So yeah, I think that kind of works out very well in your favor. JP Pegues got 6 rebounds on 2 points. Denver Jones, talk about his shooting night, was able to get 3 assists. Simo got 1 personal foul in 7 minutes. I see why he started because Miles Kelly wasn't in. And I understand Simo is really on the defensive side of it, and he played a good game defensively. But I really want to see what this team really met, how it looks. I don't think it's going to be the starting 5 that we see in game 1. I don't think it's going to be the starting 5 that you get used to seeing later on in the year. But I had mixed feelings about when Simo was announced as a starter, but I understand why. But if Simo can prove that he can play as he did, like at the end of the season, like in that SEC tournament, and then going into the March Madness, I think he can emerge as a key contributor on this team. Dylan Cardwell, 6 points in 19 minutes, also had 5 rebounds. I don't think this thing has blocks on it, so I don't know if he had any blocks. If I'm not mistaken. Auburn had 8 blocks, and I'm gonna assume here that he had a few of those. Off the bench, Todd Pettiford put up 13 points, shooting 5 of 9, 2 of 5 from the 3-point line. Also shot 50% from the free throw line. Had 3 assists, which is tied as the leader on the team. Also had 2 rebounds. Good outing for the true freshman. 24 minutes. I think that you just need to see this continuously happen. I don't want to be like I don't want to be in the same mindset I was when I saw Aiden Holloway's first game as a Tiger, where he just emerged and then he kind of dropped off. Don't want to see that. But I think Tahad plays both sides of on the court very well. So super excited. Ja'Kai Howard got to see a dunk in a game, which is awesome. So Ja'Kai Howard, 10 points in 23 minutes, also had 2 assists and a rebound. But of course, Duke can get up. He can get up, which is going to be so awesome to see. Jaheim Hudson got 7 rebounds and 4 points in 15 minutes. The guy from D3, I'm trying to remember, Huntsville, not mistaken. Is it Huntsville? I'll pause it for. All right, we're back. Oh yeah, so I had to fact check myself on that. Jaheim Hudson's from SMU. Chaney Johnson's from Huntsville. I completely confused those two in my head. A good defensive game from Jaheim Hudson in 15 minutes. Rebecca Pizarro put up 13 points. Not a good night shooting from the 3, but 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and a good thing to note. In 24 minutes, Chad Baker Pizarro, only 2 fouls. That's a great thing to note. Then you have lastly on the team, Chaney Johnson getting 10 points in 17 minutes. Also got 4 rebounds. Overall, though, but Auburn did have a couple guys in foul trouble, 4 guys with 4 fouls. Exhibition game, I think he took a lot more positives and negatives from this game. Auburn had the lead, and I don't think really gave it up that much. Had the lead for 33 and a half minutes to Furman's 5. Auburn ran away with it. Of course, they have one more exhibition game before the season starts, so can't wait for the remainder of that. Of course, Auburn women's basketball has their first exhibition game this week on Thursday, October 31st. They play against my girlfriend's alma mater, LaGrange College in Neville Arena. I do believe that the exhibition games are free admission. Don't quote me on that. So don't just go to those games expecting to get in. Just ask first. Yeah, Auburn plays their exhibition game on November 1st versus Florida Atlantic. That's men's basketball play at Neville Arena at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. And then that next week, November 6th, Auburn men's basketball is back versus Vermont in Neville Arena for the first official game of the season. And then November 8th, 2 days afterwards, women's basketball plays Virginia University in Lynchburg next Friday at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. Can't wait for both those teams to get started because I firmly believe Auburn will have 2 teams in the March Madness tournament. And I know Auburn women's they both were in their last year, but I don't mean play-in games. I think both teams are going to be highly seeded teams, and I'm trying to gauge where I think women's basketball will be at, but they're going to be in the heat of it. Super excited for both those teams. Super excited for basketball. Super excited for all the sports that are going on. Softball's looked great. Volleyball has been great. Soccer has been outstanding. Of course, equestrian is always awesome, So, that being said, that's all this time of the College Loop podcast. Of course, leave your thoughts. What does Auburn football need to do to take down the Vanderbilt Commodores on Saturday? Leave that below in the comment section. Leave it in the chat, whichever one you would like to do. And of course, don't forget to check us out on social media at the College Loop on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, the works, all those. Again, the College Loop visual aid. I can't get my finger to point at it. There we go. Right there. There we go. And of course, find me on Twitter at YABOYTank, at YABOY the Tank. And of course, Instagram as well at Larck at DYLENLARCK. Visual aids right here on my right, but for y'all it'd be left. And of course, don't forget to check out the audio versions of the show as well on TikTok, on Spotify podcasts, Google Podcasts, of course, Amazon Music. And of course, all that being said, thanks for watching. This is some of the College Loop podcast. And as always, War Eagle.